and these other items, why don't you build all our 16,000 primary schools, which are important and the need of uplift. We had somebody mention that. So we had that. Now, Bill Okero. And I know you very well. I know you're a serious economist. Well, you stated the government needs to review taxes, and you've had a good professor say he's working on it. What are the top 5 taxes that, in your view, government should review? Of course, you had Professor Ndung'u say, if you touch anything, you distort the revenue collection and everything. We are here to convince you, our dear friend, Professor Ndung'u, you can review some of these taxes. And instead of having your revenues going down, this is a submission, you will go even to the optimum level. You'll be able to raise so much. Kenyans will willingly give, but not when you have 20, I think, how many items. You'll be hearing from Honorable Eugene Wamalwa on the number of some of those things. And then G2G. This story about Uganda, Davis, did you not think, even within the framework of East African community, because whenever ministers of finance of the community present their estimates to Parliament, they do so actually on an agreed date. Therefore, in the spirit of regional integration, Uganda is a very important customer to Kenya. If I'm now hearing President Museveni saying, okay, he's going to borrow your G2G effort, but he's doing it with like a pained situation. Did you consult with Uganda before you went on your G2G arrangements? Those are some of my earlier my comments, and I think, I don't know.
Thank you. I have yeah.
Yeah, we'll hear Hassan Omar, and then we can hear Eugene.
Thank you.
To the contrary, Excellency, and Chirchir, I'm a big supporter of the G2G, but just with some minimum qualifications. I just wanted to know, I know that the payment is after the lapse of the 180 days through a staggered system. My question is, at what point does the G2G framework lapse? Now we have to pay the entire sum. And number 2, are the prices hedged by any chance? Because yes, if today the prices are going up, there's a likelihood that they might also go down. I remember when I was sitting in the investigations on Kenya Airways, one of the things that was said to be fatal in the Mawingo plan or in the operations of Kenya Airways was hedging of the fuel prices. So the prices hedged. Number 2, you might not have mentioned it directly, but you had mentioned it somewhere that there were very oppressive PPAs, power purchase agreements, that had been signed by certain producers of electricity. Is it time we bit a bullet and be able to bring some of them to either a close or to termination? And I know that sometimes the worry of governments is always the liabilities that come with that type of drastic action, particularly the fact that we have a very robust court and many investors look at Kenya.
Without interrupting you, Hassan, you're referring to independent power purchasers or producers, right?
Yeah, PPAs.
Because that issue is also, in fact, I wanted Bill Okero also to deal with it, but please continue.
So and then I overhear this whole issue about investment here, investment there, investment here. We are building this, we are building that. Will all these investments ultimately bring down the cost of electricity? There's a large allegation that the KPLC is owned by a certain mother of ourselves, and she sells this electricity very punitively to us. So I think if you might be able to address the supply chain, but in terms of now the demand, will you be able to enjoy more affordable electricity or cheap electricity? Hinga, the Excellency will tell you that I've been your biggest proponent here, very passionate about the housing agenda, because it's part of our social contract to give dignity to our people, and I heard you allude to it. You know, the irony is that in Kenya, as we create wealth, we must also bridge the gap to ensure that the dignity of the poor is improved. So we cannot just be saying that we wait for the economy to improve and that's when we start to build houses. We must do both simultaneously or concurrently. But I just wanted you to clarify that this money is not actually for building houses. You're actually facilitating private investors to build these houses. All you're doing is to also to be able to do some bit of market risk, to take up part of the market risk. And number two, to structure affordable mortgages using the housing fund so that you can be able to have more Kenyans access these housing at affordable rates. Rugo, for you, I just had one question. I comment everybody agrees with you. And some of these opaque contracts are those like the Mawingo plan under KQ. We are paying a certain bank. The Mawingo plan was designed to bring Kenya Airways down to benefit a few people. I think, what do you think is the sustainability of the government of Kenya? Why do you think Professor Ndung'u still has to pay for it when we know where the travesties were? We know who is benefiting. We know who the leader of that criminal enterprise is. Why are we still paying for the liabilities of a single person and a single individual? So I think I wanted to hear from you. What would you advise our government in these very important economic times to do? To keep Kenya Airways paying its debt, or to keep Kenyans a bit more engaged in terms of their day-to-day life issues? The last one, I think I don't have much of a question to Bill. I always read his comments, and to a large extent, I actually do agree with you. And that I, in particular, as much as I am a member of the Kenya Kwanza government, the KNTSC was a total fraud. It was supposed to be about market stabilization, and then the KNTSC ends up selling products more expensive than the market itself. So I'm hoping that an investigation will be done, and those responsible in distorting all these market prices and putting Kenyans into such loss will be taken to book. I think those are some of the kind of things we must stand for. But the last one, Professor Ndung'u, I think what I flagged in this whole discussion of the cost of living were two issues. Apart from our imports, is food and fuel. And fuel is tied to the dollar. And I really liked your idea about the nominal exchange rate in terms of having an automatic stabilization. But what we hear is that people are holding on to these dollars. There's no dollar deficiency in the market. I'm told by the economic team that there's $8.5 billion in the Kenyan market today. But because you have left the market take charge, so I can hold on to my dollars. I also have a few dollars these days. And I hold on to them because I know what was at 138 a few months ago is now even I take loans from friends on Kenya shillings. I know that as the dollar strengthens, I'll just liquidate my dollar account and pay them back. So what will you do? But they are not many, so it's not comfortable.
No, don't go back on it. So you have a few dollars, which is on the lower side.
Yes. So if I am thinking like that, what of others who have a larger cachet? So you've left it to the market stabilization, automatic stabilization, but then you're not doing much to ensure that those people with dollars put their dollars in the market, so that at least the rate of the dollar is mitigated. So as we leave it to that free flow, we must also make sure that we put in some minimum regulation to ensure that those with dollars are able to put them into the market, or to ensure that the rate is stabilized at a certain point.
Well, thank you. We gather that Bilo is requesting to be released by 2 o'clock. I think we can allow you when it comes to answering first. Yeah. But let us hear Eugene.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. I think to the CS National Treasury and CS Energy, we've been sitting here for, I think, over 70 days. But one of the most shocking revelations that was made before this committee was by the Control of Budget about a new phenomenon called budgeted corruption. Now that we have the National Treasury here, because she went on record, would like you to also go on record to clarify this issue that shocked us, that shocked the nation. And she gave an example of her own salary. And she said when she looked at what had been budgeted, it was 3 times. Yet what she gets is what is her actual salary. Therefore, there is something fishy at the National Treasury. There's some cooking going on there. I would like you, CS, to clarify this issue, because we know that corruption is one of the biggest, actually, challenges that the country is facing. It's estimated that almost 30% of our budget really is consumed by corruption. So if we are able to contain that issue of corruption, we've also heard from the experts the issue of the government overspending. If we're able to rein in those 2 issues, I think there will be enough money to ensure that Kenyans are not really overtaxed as they are. I would like you to guide us on that one. The other issue was also what has been referred to as the G2G. We were very concerned, and I think His Excellency Chair Kalonzo Musyoka has raised that issue. We've had concerns from our neighbors in Uganda about that G2G. There was some opaqueness to that deal. I would like to know from the CS Energy whether that framework agreement has been tabled in Parliament, whether it was. There has been some lack of transparency to the extent that our neighbors raised concerns, and I think they're making some serious decisions based on what is happening in Kenya. I got from President Museveni's comments, and this is what he said, if you look at his Twitter, that without my knowledge, our wonderful people who are buying this huge quantity of petroleum products from middlemen in Kenya. A whole country buying from middlemen in Kenya or anywhere else. It's amazing, but it's true. This is what is happening. Why not buy from refineries abroad and transport through Kenya and Tanzania, cutting the cost created by these middlemen? We would like to know from the CS, because we are told our Ugandan neighbors, who are our biggest trading partners actually, are considering, of course, engaging Tanzania and other alternative routes, which will also have serious impact. Please enlighten us on that. The other issue is the issue of housing. We know that PS Hinga has been very passionate. I was privileged to have served with him in the last regime. And it is true that this was one of the key pillars of the Big Four agenda of the Jubilee administration that we served together. But of course, we ran into headwinds. Kenyans raised concerns. Kenyans went to court. And at the time, we had COVID-19 and other challenges. We did decide, and as government, I think, to shelve it. We know that this regime is equally passionate about this housing issue. But of course, you cannot mourn louder than the bereaved. The bearer of the vision himself actually was able to stand down. Why can't you consider, given the current economic situation, the outcry of all Kenyans, from teachers to the policemen to, professionals, who are literally being forced to, pay for this housing issue? Many of them have taken out mortgages. We heard from the chair of Public Service Commission. They are taking home just about a third of their salaries. Many of them are going into depression. To add this housing levy on top of their very thin pay slips is the most oppressive thing under the prevailing economic situation. Why wouldn't you consider, as we did in the last regime, doing away with this for now? So that you don't have to do everything at once. As experts have said, you cannot load everything at once on this Kenyan who is already overtaxed. The other alternatives that we had, of course, the idea of job creation. There were those infrastructure developments. We did send money to the education sector, construction of classrooms, construction of, building of desks. This created local employment. We had the Kazi kwa Vijana, almost 2 billion monthly, putting money in the pockets of young people, creating employment. What we are saying is that you can still create these jobs without forcing this bitter pill of the housing levy on Kenyans at this time. Would you consider those alternatives? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Catherine. Let's hear Catherine.
Thank you, Chair.
So sorry, Chair. I left something for the National Treasury. My point that you had referred to on the, I think we were expecting to hear from the CS National Treasury, because all the experts have said there are too many taxes and you need to review some. On fuel alone, as we heard from our earlier presenters, from road maintenance levy, petroleum development levy, petroleum regulatory levy, railway development levy, anti-adulteration levy, merchant shipping levy, import declaration, all this plus VAT being doubled from 8 to 16. What Kenyans were expecting from you today is to know which of this you can realistically reduce, give them some relief in the short term, even as you're looking at the long term, and also the issue of the housing levy. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the team that is before us, you seem to have really explained so much about the cost of living. But what are the efforts the respective ministries and PSs are making to explain the issues of cost of living to the most affected grassroots Kenyans that live here? The country is burning with questions. Why are you not getting out, honestly, to give these answers that you have explained here to us? It is imperative that you move out as ministries, as PSs, to give these explanations to the country. What consideration, again, has been given to the impact of cost of living, especially on women and people living with disability, who bear the biggest burden when there is fuel and tax rises or tax increment? We would like also to hear that. What impact have you done? PS Hinga, thank you so much. You have explained so much. I've listened to you time and again. Almost got convinced. But PS Hinga, to what extent are women and even people living with disability included in the value chain of housing and manufacture in relation to the affordable housing? In the award of even your contracts or your contracts to the applicants who make to your ministry in application to getting chances of this housing, have you given any consideration to women? I've never heard you talk about that. And finally, I'm still at it on Chirchir. You have only given the comparison of Kenya and other countries and how we are doing better. Is there any other way you can do it better instead of just giving comparison? You have also talked about the opaqueness in prices. What do we do about that? As a person and as CS in charge of that. I think I'll come back later. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mine is going to be very, very short because a lot has been addressed. I just want to know, because in today's daily nation business of today, there is a suggestion that over 6,000 foreign investors flee Nairobi Security Exchange in 9 months. Is this true? And if this is the case, what could be the cause? Two, I've come to notice from my office in Parliament that since the current projection on the housing, Mr. Hinga, The current projection to the housing fund is about to Kenya shilling 74 billion, if I'm not wrong. And yet there's a proposal to reduce this by about Kenya shillings 10 billion in the current supplementary budget. If this is true, what would be the basis for this reduction, since you have stated declared that this housing levy is going to continue? How is it being reduced midstream? Yeah. Then, what is the current collections to the housing fund? Yeah, that's the point for us to know. Yeah. And what framework are you putting in place to defray expenditure from the fund? Finally, there's this vexed question of the exchange rate, Professor Ndung'u. Try to explain to me as a layman, really, all that has been said. Then why is it the case that the value of the Kenya shilling is equally depreciating against the other East African currencies? Try to break it down to me. Assume I'm just a layman who doesn't understand those fundamentals. Okay? Yes. Now, finally, Professor Ndung'u, of course, as a scholar, assume for the last 10 months or so, it's now a year actually, since the coming into being of the current administration, when all is said and done, and after all the experiments, if I may call them so, yeah, now, what in your view is working and what is not working? And what can you possibly consider doing to address this issue of high cost of living? Because as you know, it's one issue that won't be swept under the carpet very easily. It won't. Okay? So can we leave this meeting with some practical suggestions or recommendations on what the government is going to do to reduce the cost of living? Or do we give up and throw our hands in the air to machine work? Then the people can decide for themselves what to do. Thank you.
Well done. I think Senator Mgeni, and then would we allow Bilo to try and make it? I think you can be very brief, yeah? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Now, the first one is to CS energy. From the table that I have before me, fuel lands at a cost of 123. When you add taxes, it goes to 217. And it seems taxation on fuel can have an impact on tax collection. I read last week that KRA has missed its target on fuel by 1.2 billion in the first quarter of 2023-2024. And that's a negative effect on our desire to collect taxes. Now, CS, this is the statistics. That's the real position on the ground. What should be the way forward, bearing in mind also that these high taxes have a very high cost, a very high impact on the cost of living? Number two, this issue of subsidy related to the 80 shillings that Kenyans bear as a tax per litre of fuel they consume. They understand it, subsidy is a measure the government puts in place to lower the cost of fuel or the price of fuel so that you cushion the general public. Now, we all agree that the cost of fuel is beyond the reach of many Kenyans as we speak. Some countries like Mexico, President Lopez is using subsidy to cushion the citizen. Doesn't the government feel the pain of Kenyans, the suffering of Kenyans, to consider this issue of subsidy? Now, to the CS Treasury. This process has been very consultative, CS Ndung'u. This is maybe to CS Ndung'u and housing. Now, listen to the situation on the ground. The chair of public service told us that because of this sudden increase in taxes, including what you are calling an investment on housing levy, civil servants are undergoing serious depression. And those are the Kenyans you tax to give service. They are undergoing serious depression. These are the statistics from the public service itself. About 12,532 public officers have sought psychosocial support in the financial year 2022-2023, a steep rise from a figure of 6,600 in the previous financial year 2018-2019. In terms of what in their pocket, Hinga, is that about 17,000 of the public servants are earning less than 1/3, and they will never benefit from this very ambitious housing development agenda of UDA. So they are not going to be able to take mortgages for the houses you are building. Now, two proposals have been put on the table. The first one is the public service itself, and these are policy shifts even as we are waiting for the court case. They propose that to cushion these poor public officers, you consider housing levy to be taxed at basic, not gross. That has come from the public service itself, control of budget, and parliamentary budget office. The second one is even more, I think, maybe controversial and reasonable. The public service argues that this investment you are doing, there are a number of public officers who have already taken mortgages, and you cannot force them to take another mortgage. Their payslip can't take that mortgage. And the public service is proposing that they should be exempted from this additional housing levy so that you give relief to them and boost their performance. What would be your comment? If you permit me, I will ask Biro Kero. Biro Kero, we have worked together before in anti-corruption, and the statistics that we have as Kenyans is that Fuliza has grown spontaneously since the launch of the ASLA fund. How do you explain this when the government has opined that the ASLA fund has been fairly successful? And then maybe finally, there is a comment that was made here by the controller of budget that at times we budget for corruption. This is to you, CS Treasury. Now, state corporation budgets really, according to the control of budget, can be a conduit for corruption on government money. That being the problem, CS, what would be your recommendation on the way forward? Because the people who have spoken here have said corruption actually contributes largely to the high cost of living. Then the El Nino allocation, CS, has this money been spent or it's lying somewhere? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can now begin answering sessions, but not before I make just a small comment. You know, I was not here the day Margaret Nyakango made her confessions, or so to speak, but I find her confession to be a typical Kenyan problem. if you read our constitution, Article 228(5), on the responsibilities and the roles of a controller of budget. Allow me just to read it verbatim so that we have it on record. The controller shall not approve any withdrawal from a public fund unless satisfied that the withdrawal is authorized by law. So here you have the person that the Constitution has given the responsibility of ensuring that any withdrawal from the public kitty is her mandate. Then she comes before the committee and tells us, I have seen this being budgeted elsewhere and I don't know how money is being lost. Surely, with that confession, I thought probably we should have asked her to resign. Because if you are allowing withdrawals through what is now being revealed to the committee and called budgeted corruption, then it means either you're incompetent or you are part and parcel of those that are stealing from us.
Information. Order.
Yeah. And order.
Honorable Chairs, there's a statement which is circulating attributed to the CS for National Treasury. It's dated today. It's a statement in response to the allegations by the controller of budget. I just wanted to, as you answer Professor Ndung'u, perhaps address the issue in your statement, because it has just come before us now, on page 2, where you claim that for financial year 2022-2023, approved budget for personal allowances for the office of the controller of budget was Kenya shilling 7.3 million, which was reduced to Kenya shilling 700,000 in the supplementary budget. Yet actual expenditure was only Kenya shillings 50,000. And now come this financial year, you still go ahead to budget for Kenya shilling 7.5 million. What would have informed this budgeting if the previous financial year, the only expenditure was 50,000 shillings? Down from a budget of 7.3 million. Is this what Nyakang was talking about? Finally, thanks.
Yeah, and I think
I will answer that, Your Excellency, because I think we are looking at personal allowances and salaries differently. So I have itemized that. Yeah.
Yet, Prof, before you answer, I want us to lift the work of this committee beyond incriminating other people, because we may not have the ability. I mean, unless we call them for come and respond. I think there's a principle in law which says at some stage, let the laws lie where it belongs or where it is. I would therefore, I know that Aaron feels very strongly about this, but I think we need to be able to moderate even ourselves, because there will be things which may be unpalatable. We've heard of new and old state capture. We have heard all those things, and without even bringing names. So, I personally think that we should avoid a situation where we reduce this session into discussion of the control of budget. Thank you.
But, Mr. Chairman, I think Aaron was alluding to a statement where he was not there in present, but is just giving a comment on the same. This is the same control of budget who said she was sent SMSs to withdraw 7 billion shillings and kind of thing.
Via WhatsApp.
Via WhatsApp. So
anyway, I think Bilo had requested to have the first bite so that he can leave. And since you are my budget and finance committee chair, Bilo,
I'll comment.
Please make a comment on that issue. Office of the Controller of Budget, so that we are able to know whether what she is alleging is true, or we need to be a bit more prudent with our public officers.
Very well. Thank you very much, Chairman. I think were there earlier, I did actually talk about that and say the buck stops with the control of budget, because no money can be withdrawn without our express approval, as you read very clearly. So I think...
Yet below, it's not a matter of withdrawal of monies from what we had from the controller.
The second part, the one on the budget.
Because we should talk about personal emoluments.
The MP raised.
Yes.
I think is very important.
Okay.
The challenge we have, Mr. Chairman, is Treasury is required to use zero-based budgeting. Then they would look at what did this person spend last year? 50,000? Yes, 50,000. But when you go by incremental system, how much was the budget office last year? The budget figure in the estimates was 7.5. They just start from 7.5 and add something. So this is part of the challenges we have. But it's very clear that notwithstanding whatever has been budgeted, Mr. Chairman, whether it's repeated, our salary is repeated 3 times or 4 times, no withdrawal can be done without approval from the controller of budget. I think that's very clear. So in other words, if that money is lost, if for whatever reason somebody used her name to withdraw money, then I think clearly her office would know and should be in a position to. So very close, very, very quickly, Chairman, the questions which were asked. On the hustler, let me start from not in any particular order, but very quickly. I think that the main challenge on the uptake of hustler, why it's not, in my view, as successful as Fuliza is because it did not meet the expectations for whatever reasons. I think people expected probably the amounts to be higher, or but the fact that the interest rates is only 8%, and Fuliza has much more, has a higher percentage, did not stop Kenyans from continuing with Fuliza. And now you'll see that in Fuliza the default rate is nil. With Hustler the default rate is 20%. And the uptake is low, and this is why Treasury, I think, probably was able to reduce it to 5 billion. So I think probably the expectations people had from government.
On a lighter note, I heard CS Ndung'u say he's actually a member of Hustler Fund.
Well,
I think he does that as a minister responsible, maybe to monitor the uptake or whatever.
Yes,
but
so,
I think Mr. Professor Ndung'u cannot be that kind of a hustler.
But it's important that we take note, underline what the CS Treasury said about market. Let us incentivize the markets to do their work. If we really looked at what Fuliza is doing, and government looked at, start with Fuliza and probably looked at some of the challenges, they would not need to allocate money to do Fuliza's work. If government looked at incentivize the housing, the construction, the contractors, in terms of tax remissions, in terms of granting bank facilities or lower, bank, so I think then you would not have needed Kenyans to be taxed, 1.5 plus 3% to fund housing. I think the market thing, Bwana CS, Treasury, if it is important that you put your foot down on your colleagues, that let us not try and do everything as government, because that money will come from taxpayers and we don't have the money. On the IPP, Mr. Chairman, I only want to comment and say that there was a very, very good report in September last year on the independent power purchase agreement by the task force, the presidential task force. We need that one to be implemented. It will address all the challenges we have discussed here. Do we have the political will to implement that power purchase agreement task force report, which was very clear, and eminent Kenyans actually spend a lot of time coming up with what needs to be done to address that matter. On the dollar, I think what the CS, I would advise the CS Treasury to do is, even now under his watch, the challenge that the reason why Kenyans are keeping $8 billion in their commercial bank accounts, and they're not, selling it to the bank, is because of the existence of the dual exchange rate. It is there up to now. Let him do away with that. Why would central bank tell you that the exchange rate is 150? When you go and want to buy it is 156, 157. So I think if that is not there, nobody will keep that money. So the question of the shortage or the would disappear. The tax review I have suggested, that there are actually taxes which are critical, and the most common ones are the levies. These levies are called levies, but they're in forms of taxes, and they're not being used for the purposes for which they were originally intended. This is why I said some of those levies need to be reviewed and need to be removed, really, and they're not adding value except making the cost of production higher. And the ones for fuel has been mentioned, for example. And the ones I have mentioned, things like the one for Agricultural Food Authority, the one RDL, Railway Development, which really it's not being used to service that loan, and so forth. So I think those are some of the taxes that, in my view, needs to be reviewed. Then on the market, the dollar is still on the dollar. I heard the CSA, this thing was managed. But let me tell you, in any country, because of external shocks, to insulate the economy, the manufacturers and businessmen and everyone from sudden volatility, any country you go in this world, central banks do intervene in the exchange rate to avoid that sudden volatility. It is normal. If, for example, the shilling today goes to 200, central bank cannot just sit and wait. Tomorrow, people who are doing businesses, there'll be chaos. You have to try and go to the market. And this is what I think has been happening in the past. And I think that can still happen. But what we are seeing is that there's need to really address that issue. My worry is that government of Kenya seems to depend on IMF. That IMF tells you your shilling is overvalued, and so we just go back and say, okay, and relax. But I think we need to look at the economy critically and to avoid that kind of thing. Mr. Chairman, 2 or 3 others I just want to mention very quickly. One, for the cost of living. For cost of living, I think, and I've said it very clearly in my report, we must review every policy and regulatory proposal in terms of its impact on the cost of living before cabinet and parliament approval is sought. I think this is important because you see every day, a department, a ministry, coming up with something. We're going to introduce this. We're going to charge this. We're going to change this. Every change of policy that has an impact on the cost of living should not be taken, to cabinet and parliament until it has been examined clearly in terms of its impact on the cost of living. I think this is important. There was a bill last year in 2021 before Parliament to amend the PFM, Public Finance Management Act, to give members of Parliament to require that all loans must get prior approval from Parliament before Treasury signs the dotted lines. I think that is critical, gentlemen and ladies. This is critical. Otherwise, we will continue getting Parliament as a rubber stamp, approving loans which have been signed in London, in Korea, in Japan, anywhere. And, I think it's something that law needs to be revisited. It's critical. Chairman, very quickly, the last two I want to mention is that, in my view, to address these challenges on the economy, because there is a disconnect between what Kenyans feel about the state of the economy and what needs to be done and what the government thinks. I think it's time we have a national convention on the status of the economy with the right stakeholders. You have to get, the people who are in business, you have to get the professional and business organizations and forums, you have to get the farmers, the industries, and so forth. Let us discuss really this issue about our economy, because there are challenges. Government does not engage adequately with business. That is the challenge. And so we can't just, as government, come up with rules and regulations and then businesses feel there sometimes. And there are sectors where people are engaged, but I think there are many, and there's benefit. It will give government an opportunity also to listen. Listen to the farmers. Listen to the industry, to investors, to SMEs. That is very important. Instead of just, a top-down approach. Lastly, I think I want to conclude by saying that the question of spending, as Dr. Rugo said, is critical. Unless we cut our clothes to our size, we will continue to be talking in these forums. And I think the argument by Treasury, and I heard what the CS said, that we cannot just, which expenses will be cut. I think clearly what we know is that if you take a pen and paper and go through the printed estimates, really, there are things which are not a priority. There are things which you can defer. Even needs can be deferred so that you don't get into a bigger crisis. I think it's important we review the question of spending so that we can keep this country in one piece. Otherwise, we will go over the precipice. This is my thoughts. Thank you very much.
We thank you, Honorable Bill Okero. Do we follow that order?
Yeah.
We follow that order. Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Abram.
Thank you, Co-Chairs. I was asked two questions. One, Bilo has responded to a bit, but I'll First, I was asked, is it true that 80% of Kenyans? I want to also encourage the PS for housing to refer to national statistics. He referred to documents by other people out there. We have a national census 2019, which is what we use. This is what it says. There are 12.1 million households in this country. They are divided between rural and urban. Rural are 7.4, urban are 4.7. 86%, that is 6.3 in rural, own their own homes. And that's the figure I was referring to. Maybe just to clarify that. Yes, 86. And if you had my comment, I was saying, what is the need in the rural areas for building houses? Because he said he has written to every member of parliament asking for land. I don't think even any MP owns land in the first place, public land, but that's a story for another day. And 21.3 in urban areas own their own homes. The rest rent, a good number rent. The question is, do they have a problem renting? Is there anything across the world? Most populations live in rented homes, rented houses. Of course, we have a challenge. Is a challenge actually that there are no houses or that people cannot afford mortgages? I think let's address the right challenge. And that's why I say I think there's still a lot to be discussed around the housing. I will not belabor that. What to do with, why say cut taxes on one side and at the same time cut spending? Is indeed a contradictory. It is not. The reason for that is that the more we discuss this as purely a revenue problem, the more we get it wrong, in my opinion. Because we seem to say all our expenditures are right. I gave an example of the state-owned enterprises. If you go through the levies, a lot of those levies and rates are charged to maintain these state-owned enterprises because they have to get some money to keep them going, because that's basically what they established, and agencies. And in my opinion, I think that it will be of value to, first of all, look at, remember those institutions, just to take us one step back, are also playing in this intergovernmental space where between counties and national government. Look at the number of them in the water sector. Look at the number of them, in the different frameworks, and we seem to be even creating more with the law. So there is a possibility to actually look at the efficiencies, and the Auditor General is on record, just flagging out expenditures that were not right. If you work on all those numbers, including the 2 billion that the current government has committed to confirm, whether it's true that, as per the former president, that we lose 2 billion every day. If you do the math, if you were to cursorily look at that figure, 2 billion per day gives you about 710 billion in a year. That gives you almost the deficit that we are talking about. So there are options, and the options is not just going and saying, let's raid this ministry and cut their expenditure, but it has to be a mix. Look at the tax expenditures, already some improvements there. That is the amount of money we give in terms of rebates. Why not go and reduce that so that we give rebates to Kenyans in terms of and the rest is what we've talked about, the fuel. Must we charge everything? Because we are saying we are not in normal times. Yet there is something we can do. The last question, which was about KQ, I think a lot of these state-owned enterprises need to run on a business model. You don't make a profit, you don't run, you shut down. We don't go to save every other company out there. We should actually be saving, because right now, as we hear of capital flight, we should actually be working to save that. So we cannot continue to save companies that are not performing, yet doing business. Kenya Airways, anybody who flies with Kenya Airways, despite the delays here and there, is fairly full. At least I have fallen. It's always fairly full. So I don't understand where the loss comes from, and it's the most expensive. Just to also say, those are my thoughts, and happy to continue with this conversation. Thank you very much.
Much, Abraham. We will now. I think we go to the PS. Don't you think so? PS Inga, and then we come to the CSS. But even as you do so, the few houses that Kenyans have put up for themselves get demolished. That's the house. That's your department, and some of them are really very, very expensive houses. And yet we heard from Hassan Omar's Kenya Kwanza government that the demolition be a thing of the past. So what happened in Mavoko is heart-rending. Does it prick your conscience? Does it really? Yeah, just for me, I should have put this to you because you're such a marketer and I know you. So today we are not going to get you to sweat, but please think about some of those things.
Now you want me to start sweating, and I think I had done pretty well. If I was to answer the questions in a methodical way from the co-chair and the majority leader, he spoke about, other than the hinges, these other items, what is the policy intervention? One, what we have done is we have identified the 69. Number two, we have standardized them. It's very, very important. Why standardization? You know, in Kenya, we don't have a standard door. We don't. Because a door in Kenya is basically the space that you leave after you finish building your house. Meaning that you must get a fundi to come and customize your door. And if we continue on that line, we will never be able to benefit from the large economies of scale. So it is important that, first of all, we standardize, and we have done the standard. We have come up with what is called a Juakali manual, which is available. We have given it to them, and with the standards for those 69 items. The next thing is to take this thing to Parliament so that it becomes now entrenched. We are discussing with our committee whether it is going to be as a bill or as a policy. I understand that there is somebody who had brought in a bill in Parliament. We'll see whether we can be able to ride on it. Your Excellency, the Honorable Vice Chair, I think when we talk about the housing levy being an investment in ourselves, we are actually not. We're not using it incorrectly. We are investing in ourselves. And how do we invest in ourselves?
But is it a tax? You need to come out clearly.
It is a tax. Yeah.
So
But
why do you call it a levy in your presentation?
A levy is a tax.
A levy and a tax, there's no difference.
Actually, just go take the definition of a levy from Wiki and what do you call it? Wikipedia. It is a tax. Okay.
And the CS calls it an investment. It's a bit confusing.
The effect is an investment. We're investing in ourselves, okay? Because we are taking that money and putting it in productive sectors that are going to be very important in the creation of jobs.
But Mr. Hinga, let's be clear. You say a levy is a tax.
Yes.
Now, my own understanding, we've heard it from here, from various presenters, a task, if it is a housing tax, then everybody, irrespective of who they are, will be subject to that tax.
Correct.
To tax. But if it's a levy, then you can even go on a voluntary basis. Those who want to, because there are people, for example, who are in their 60s, going to retire, or may have retired, and they're paying a housing tax. So they ask themselves, how will this benefit me? Because I'm just about to retire. But if it is a tax, then of course they have to pay. And that is a punitive aspect that Eugene was talking about. Yeah.
I think from the PS, the CS's presentation is calling it an investment. An investment can be voluntary. And, according to the priority of either that teacher, that lawyer, that doctor, that policeman. But what is oppressive about this is that you must pay it as an employer. It's cutting both ways,
yep,
including people losing their jobs because they can't sustain this.
Correct.
Yeah. The CS didn't just refer to it as an investment. He actually qualified it further and said that this is an investment, not a tax.
Not a tax.
Yes.
Please help us understand.
Not a tax. Now you are contradicting your own senior colleague there.
I said I'll come and rectify that because it's right up. Let me come at my turn to try and rectify that.
Yeah, but as of now, we are hearing from Bwana Hinga that this is a tax.
This is a tax.
And in fact, the CS actually called it an intervention. You know, I heard you say it's an intervention. I knew it was a tax. Everybody knows it was a tax. When we dropped it as an issue of a saving, it was immediately communicated on Parliament as a tax. So I don't know where that misunderstanding has come from the last day of this presentation.
Okay, and let's clarify. This housing levy is based on an amendment to the Employment Act. Correct. So it cannot be a tax.
It is a levy, which is a tax.
You know, now, this is one government, but you are mixing us. The taxation was done through amendment to the Employment Act. So it cannot, yeah.
All right.
Which is which?
I will leave the CS Treasury to handle the issue of the tax because I don't want to speak out of turn. Now, so the question was, you gave a very good example, the Honorable Excellency Co-Chair, about Egypt. And I think that's a very good example. But I don't know whether you've realized that for Egypt to be where they are today, in the year 2014, they made a determination to go on the same journey that we are starting today. They built new cities. They built, how many units they built? Is it 1 million? Huh? They've done between 700 and 1 million units since 2014, the last 9 years. So you're right. But we cannot say we now take our jobs to Egypt.
Not by overtaxing Egyptians.
No, there is a tax.
The context was different, but please continue. I don't want you to sweat for sure.
No. Sweating is biblical according to my CS. So, anyway,
overtaxing is also biblical. You heard of the donkey who spoke to Balaam.
I think you need to be fair to Hinga. Yeah, just let him answer the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, and then let the other clarities, whether it's a tax, whether it's not a tax, be given. And we then come and make recommendations as is, because we are really trying to ridicule a few things here.
Yeah. So we also avoid many distractions as he's speaking. Kindly.
Thank you. So the journey that Egypt took is a journey that we want to take. I know a lot of people say, don't talk about Singapore. Because in the 1960s, it's the same journey they took today. 90% of all Singaporeans live in a publicly delivered house. The issue of using the levy, again, is not unique to Kenyans. We have benchmarked widely. Any country that has ever resolved their housing issues, there has got to be ring-fenced capital. There has got to be long-term capital. So that's why if you go to Mexico, and I know there are some bad examples in terms of Mexico that we have also benchmarked and seen some of the things we must avoid doing. So Mexico has the levy. If you go to our neighbors, Nigeria, they have a levy. China has a levy. We can have a whole study that is actually uploaded. If only we can download and read. The entire benchmarking study is already been given. Now, I think the Honorable Co-Chair, you asked a very fundamental question. That the cost of establishing a manufacturing plant in Kenya is expensive. Now, but I also think if that is a statement of fact, it is incumbent on us as leaders to change that. Because manufacturing does not just happen because you wish it. Manufacturing happens because you have a concrete plan. And that concrete plan must be driven by a demand for something. If there is no demand for something, there is no private sector person who is going to risk their money. That I'm just going to manufacture doors and wish and hope that the houses will be built. The market, as my senior has said, it needs to be nurtured. So we are nurturing the market, okay, by creating that consumptive demand, which is then going to anchor our manufacturing and is going to give us jobs. You know, I dare say that the existential risk of our country today is this issue of unemployment. This must be in every other word that you talk about as members of parliament. We must talk about how do we solve unemployment. And sometimes we put aside our whatever caps that we are wearing so that we can, it's a patriotic duty for all of us to find a solution to this thing called unemployment. You may disagree with how I want to do it. I may disagree with how you want to do it, but let's not run away from the fact that it is a big problem. Now, some statement was made about why don't we take this money and build classrooms? And I find that quite interesting. Because which money are you taking? Because unless you're saying that the housing levy application should go to building classrooms, the reason why we have this housing levy is because there is no fiscal space. There was no other way of funding this agenda. So you needed to come up with a plan to be able to get that capital. But let me assure you that our housing plan is not just about 4 walls and a roof. No. It is a whole ecosystem where we are building schools close to where people live. One of the reasons why we have traffic in these cities of ours, Nairobi, is because our cities have grown in an unplanned way. We have built schools in one end, we live in another end, and we work in another place. That's why we have perpetual jam. So what are we doing? We are making sure that all these homes that we are building, there is a school within walking distance. So go and look at all the affordable housing programs that we have launched. We have a school, we have a clinic, we have a market. Why? Because this is about human settlements. It's not just about housing. So I think that's a very important point for all of us to be able to appreciate. I really feel uncomfortable to try and take on my former boss, Eugene, on something that I don't think is a statement of fact. Number one, Jubilee government never abolished its affordable housing program. Never. I was a PS in charge from day one to the last day. And until the last day, we were still chasing our housing agenda. And I actually want to use this as a very good example as to why we did not succeed and why we are succeeding now. And it goes to, there is nothing that has changed in the architecture. What has changed is that right now, we have got the resources to do it. In the last government, we didn't have it because it went to court, it stayed in court. By the way, the courts never ruled. It stayed in court, it was frustrated. There were like 13 cases being opened every day. We know how it works in Kenya. But then eventually, the former president in December of 2019, I remember very well because it was Jamhuri Day, he directed that we move it from mandatory to voluntary. Now, let me tell you what the effect was. The effect was we had projected to be collecting somewhere between 6 and 7 billion a month. But between 2019 to 2022, when the Jubilee government came to an end, we had not collected more than 1.8 billion. Many years, we only collected less than 1.8. We collected less than 2 billion. Yet, we were hoping that we were going to collect 6 to 7 billion. So that is really the crux of the issue. It is not that it was a bad plan. It's not that this plan has fundamentally changed. The only thing that has changed is that we have now a funding mechanism. And even during COVID time, we were looking at sectors that we were going to revive, and housing was still one of the sectors. Unfortunately, there was no money. So if the taxpayers' existing funds cannot fund that agenda, then it did not take off. So if we go back to the fundamental reason why we are so passionate about housing, its importance in the economy, its importance in the creation of jobs, we can already see. I dare actually request this committee that next time you come and accompany me, we go to Mukuru Kojenga, here, meteorological site. You find close to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 young people that are working there. Those are jobs we didn't have, but we have them today. Today, we should look at any sector that is going to create jobs, and we must go for it. Kibera, by end of this month, will be having 5,000 people from the slum of Kibera working on that site. Those are people who did not have a job. When you go to Roiro, where we are building some 1,000 units, we have got over 2,000 young people working in those. Homa Bay, same thing. So I think it's important to understand the economics of housing and already the change that is happening. But it is gradual, and as we scale, you will now start to feel it. Then let me go to the Honorable Wambilinga. Wambilianga, sorry. My apologies for that. I think you're lucky I didn't exchange the R and the L there. So it will have been worse. Joking. One of the critical areas that we have looked at is targeted groups. This affirmative action, because this program is actually finally going to have us realize the social dividend that is in our laws but has never been implemented, the 30% rule. That's why when we went to Starehe, when we were launching Starehe, we took a women group from Babadogo. They are part of what is called the Build Her. And by the way, those young ladies, most of them single mothers, are building wonderful products. They are doing all our joineries and our finishes. They are doing an excellent job. As though you knew I was coming here, this morning I was just chatting with the advisor to the president on gender, because I have gone out there and said, where are the women in construction? Because we have ring-fenced it. We want the women in construction to take advantage of this particular agenda. So people living with disabilities, women and young people are a key focus on this agenda, and there is something in there for them. And so in the coming days, as we roll out, you should be able to see that we are launching all these various chapters at the same time. Honorable Wandai, who I must disclose that is a good friend of mine. Honorable Wandai supported me in the housing levy in the last government. And when I saw him arguing so hard against this time around, and I know he'll say it's the cost of living. Anyway, we'll have that drink because... Now, there is a question that you have asked about the 7.5 billion that has been cut. It's not 10 billion, it is about 7.5 billion. I think unless they increased it, it will have changed. But the last time I checked was 7.5 billion. So CS, I hope is not...
We are meeting the teams.
I'm going to Bunge after this, actually. So if it is a shock. Now, it is not a cut in the levy, because the levy is absolute.
Yeah.
Okay? What has been cut from my budget was the GOK. I was also drawing down a GOK funding of about 10.8 billion, okay, for my other programs. So they are told there's 3 billion which they can't touch, I was told, which is for markets. Okay, those ones, I think, unless there is an issue, that one they should not be touching. So I suspect it is 7.5. Now, you've asked the question, what is the current collection? I want to state that as at the end of October, 31st of October, we had 16.24 billion that had been collected. There was a question you asked about the deferring of expenditure from the fund. I did not really understand what you asked. So I don't know, maybe you want to rephrase it? Okay, thank you. Okay, now, the issue about Public Service Commission is very interesting because I believe, if I'm not wrong, and the CS can back me here, and you can see the handkerchief, the magic handkerchief is out. The CS can back me up here, but I think all public servants got an increase in salary before the effect of the levy. So maybe we can have a sitting with the chair of public service. But you say something which is understandable, that that there are about the head of public service said about 12.5 Kenyans or public servants going through psychological challenges and so on and so forth. And I understand it is true. And it's not just them. There are even others who have been laid off, and there are others who have never seen what is a job. So, and that's why I say that sometimes, and allow me to say this with the greatest degree of respect, that leadership is a very difficult thing. Leadership is very tough. Because, and especially if you're a politician, because sometimes, some of the decisions you're going to make might have an impact on whether you're coming back again or not. And I think that is important. But I also believe that true leadership is about rising above our own personal interest and seeing the bigger picture. Today, I reflected and I realized.
And I hope with that you try to wind up.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry, I preach a lot, so I won't do I'll avoid the altar call. On a lighter note. So I reflected and I realized that during the COVID time, I had the chance of being in a room with the former president. And let me tell you, I saw the weight of a country on the shoulders of one man. I can imagine the same thing that is going on with our current president, when every index and matrices are very difficult. And sometimes you have got to guide the country. And so I don't think leadership is an easy thing. So there are many Kenyans today that are 1 meal away from starvation. There are many Kenyans who have no jobs today. And as I say, that should be on our lips. How are we going to create jobs? Let's argue that my plan does not do enough. But let's not say we will not create those jobs. Lastly, Abraham makes some very interesting points. Very interesting points. Now, number one, in rural areas, what is the challenge we're having in housing in rural areas? You all know. Honorable Tiende will show you every other weekend he's building mud houses in Rariena. There are other places. Why? Because our rural folks, first of all, the material they have used to construct is not the right material, number one. Number two, we having people who are fragmenting land that is meant for arable land for settlements. We are dividing all our arable land, and yet we complain that we don't have sufficient food. Number three, I don't know whether you've heard about something which is called rural slums. Our rural areas have also become slums. Okay, so the plan that we have, obviously, largely is an urban issue. That is important to state. But in the rural areas, at the same time, we have the issue of land fragmentation. So what are we doing? In Murang'a, for example, we are looking at a big chunk of land where we can build 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 housing units in one settlement. One settlement. And what do we want to do? We're going to build it as a new city. So there will be all the amenities, and we want the people to live there and wake up and go to farm and then come back home, rather than continue fragmenting. And we want to take that to Kisii. There is no land left in Kisii. In some of these places, you know that there is a whole land fragmentation issue. So rural housing, we have a different program than the urban. Now, on urban side, 92% of the people in Nairobi, they rent. Now, the question that we need to ask ourselves, do you rent because you like renting, or you rent because you have no chance of owning? And the latter is the truth. Okay? So, and why are we saying owning is important? For us, owning is very, very, very important, because that house that you have earned, that you have owned, you can even use it as a collateral to go and start a business. You can use that home and bequeath it to your kids. So there is a whole plan that the Honorable Co-Chair, I would really like to have sufficient time to come and take you through, so that you understand that the plan is well thought out.
Thank you. Now, I think we'll hear Davis.
Thank you again. Excellency, I'll be very brief.
And as wordy as...
I'll be very brief, Your Excellency. Thank you again. Thank you, members of this national dialogue. The one that I want us to correct from the onset is where Honorable Ichung'wa did raise a concern about a bit of misinformation regarding what Citizen and KPC have published, that because the Financial Times did put an article, which I expect the Fourth Estate to have read, that if the Hamas-Israeli war continues, in the coming months, we are likely to see an accelerated increase in the prices of petroleum product, and that could go as high as $150 per barrel, not $150 per liter, as published by KBC. And it's basically looking at the future. It's an article which is published. Your Excellency, it is geopolitics which we are discussing in this room today, to the extent that the pricing of petroleum products has exacerbated the depreciation of the shilling in the last short while by about 25%. That's why CS Treasurer was saying, even if everything remained the same, the 25% depreciation would still cause the pain that we are discussing today. So we will need that correction so that we don't basically send the wrong information. With respect to Your Excellencies and honorable members, the geopolitics which really impacted on what my colleague called the need to... the need to...
Sorry, Co-Chairs, I didn't get CS Chirchir clearly from what you said and what is misleading, because we also don't want to accuse the media unfairly. They've been part of this journey. They are here with us until the end of this journey. I was just listening to what you were saying. I want you to tell us what you think was misleading.
To $80 to $90, and I read an article in the Financial Times the other day because of the Hamas and Israeli war. That that the international prices could go up to $150, and that would literally mean our products going to a high of 300 shillings per liter at the pump. We hope it doesn't.
Per liter at the pump. So where are you saying was misreported? Because we don't want to be unfair to our media. They are our partners.
Thank you for playing that, because that's accurate. Yes. The $150, we don't buy products out in the international market on the liter. We buy on the barrel. So the $150 is referring to the barrel and not to the liter, because the product are not traded internationally on liters. It's traded on barrels. And the article, like I said, it's published in the Financial Times, and I didn't quote Financial Times, does talk to the pricing is likely to go to $150 per barrel in the coming months. And that, when you bring to the liter in the market, is likely to really continue accelerating the price to the liter at the pump. And it could go as high. And it could go as high as $300.
300 shillings per liter. This is what has been reported. And it comes quite close to what Moses Kuria said, that it will be increasing, and he put it up to 260, which is not far from what you're saying. So we don't want the media to be accused unfairly. What is misleading
I think
about
also
that?
You have to be fair.
I think
we have corrected perceptions on the media here on many occasions that the media has inaccurately reported. When Chirchir tries to correct perception, no, because this was raised by Ishungwa, so as for him to clarify. So suddenly, when they are Chirchir and Kenya Kwanza is clarifying a misinformation, it is about independence of media.
Order.
I understood it the same way he's just clarified it.
Hassan,
No.
I'm quite sure.
Be fair to people.
No, I think, Hassan, take it easy. Davis, please continue and avoid reference to Kenya Kwanza. We are here as a committee.
It's not Kenya Kwanza issue.
Please.
Whether you are Azimio or Kenya Kwanza, you're doing the same.
It is a government of Kenya issue, which is a Kenya Kwanza issue. But he, what he said is exactly what he has clarified.
Allow him to clarify.
No, he has clarified.
Your Excellency, I have it here in writing. Yeah. It has been thrown out there by KPC. It is written, Energy CS Chirchir says the war between Israeli Hamas could see fuel rise to $150 per liter. It is in writing. So you could also validate that.
I think you have done the
clarification.
Let's move.
So, Your Excellency and honorable members, I was basically saying the geopolitics, and particularly the post-recovery from COVID, is what has really, and we talked so much about the tightening of the monetary policy. In fact, if we didn't do what we did in Kenya, and which Uganda is trying to do, what Tanzania is trying to do, I bet the dollar to the shilling today will be way above 200. And I stand to be guided on that. The point here, Chair, and I'll take all the G2G questions because they've been raised by all the honorable members, so I take it in one hit. It's basically, remember, in May, June last year, before we went for elections, we were having stockouts in the whole country. And honorable members with our big cars were running around with jerrycans to stock fuel in their houses. And the oil marketing companies were arrested because we believed that they were holding petroleum when they actually did not have the dollars to offtake the product from Mombasa. At the time, Your Excellency and honorable members, we did the G2G. One company and a number of them bought the dollar at 149 as early as April. The situation was dire, let's not forget. So doing G2G for Kenya was one innovative way as an intervention. We did not expect that the tightening of the monetary policy will go on for 2, 3, 4 years. But it will be really lack of foresight for us as leadership, not like UK did not react immediately and the dollar became stronger than the sterling pound. We reacted to basically forestall the exiting of $500 million every month, like I did indicate in my earlier opening statement, by ensuring that we could delay the dollar exiting the country, allow those dollars to play in the macro areas of the economy, food security, medicine, expatriation of the profit by other companies, rewinding of the what do you call of the swaps, but more importantly, ensuring that we are able to hold the country together and kill what is still obtaining today, which is the interbank rate, which was trading at a high of 15%. You go and sell your dollars, you're given 130. You go to buy, you are told the price is 145. And that came down to a differential of about 3 shillings, which is what we know. So having said that, I think it's important to basically say it was an intervention. If the tightening of the monetary is eased today, there is no reason why we will not go back to OTS. And more importantly, our G2G trades on the platform of OTS. It is an open tender. We did have the governments who are supplying to compete. It is not a government to government per se, in that, like I said, it is off balance sheet. Government don't trade in petroleum. It is still traded by the oil marketing companies who work with the international oil marketing companies who are owned by other governments, and the only G2G is coming in to do an MOU and to do a framework agreement, but the commercial agreement is being left to be done by the local oil marketing companies and the international government-owned oil companies who are giving us the product. And I'm giving this background because it will be important in the context of what's happening in Uganda today. And being a sovereign state, and we've presented a cabinet paper to support what they are doing. And I want to say, Your Excellency, because you asked this question, we've worked very closely with my colleague from Uganda for the last almost 6, 7 months in trying to understand and go this route. Because Uganda, with their refinery and the fact that they want to export products, want to build their UNOC. UNOC is Uganda National Oil Company. And they want to kind of get capacity to be able to handle products like the way we do in Kenya. And what has then since happened is, like we did change the regulations to allow G2G to trade, because it was only an OTS. Our regulations only allowed the OTS frame to be able to trade in this space, and we did amend our regulations. What Uganda is currently doing is amending their act, Petroleum Act, to allow UNOC to bring products to Uganda as on Uganda balance sheet. I think it's important to say that, though I did say I don't want to really go much into. So Uganda, unlike what we do here, will be bringing products into Uganda and expiring the trading by the oil companies in Uganda. So the bill is in the House. There is need for some marketing for the thing to go through the House, but I don't want to go into that space. But so much to say, it's a space we have worked together very closely. In our cabinet paper, if I picked one sentence, Kenya will stand to benefit because today 90% of products in Uganda are traded through our pipeline in Kenya and Mombasa port. And when they do what they are doing, 100% of the product, including the 10% which comes into Uganda through Tanzania or Dar es Salaam, will all come through Kenya. So there is absolutely nothing wrong in what Uganda is doing, to the extent that we might see a slow in the dollar, which is coming because of the export products, and which I did say the DPK is still trading on the dollar anyway. That was the situation on the OTS. The dollars were exiting immediately. They were not sitting in our economy for 1 minute. Under the OTS, it's spot purchase. The dollars were being paid to the international oil marketing companies, unlike today when we are withholding the dollars for at least 180 days and using those dollars to support the economy in terms of the liquidity of the dollar and the benefits that I talked about, including the depreciation that I have asked my colleague to talk to in terms of 3% depreciation to 1%, and those are numbers from Central Bank. So, Your Excellency and honorable members, the G2G, in our view, is really help the country. We need to possibly spend more time to look at the details. As we speak today, we have brought in 42 cargoes through G2G and sitting on some 3.4 billion, which could have exited the economy immediately, and which I did say on the T-bill -2 or SOFRA -2, it is sitting in the economy, and whatever interest we earn, we are taking to the PAM to support on the depreciation of the shilling, which is also part of why the prices are going up in this time because of the challenges that we faced, like has been mentioned. The issue of subsidy, as raised by Senator Mogeni, is something that we did say we don't want to do subsidy, but we have a stabilization fund. The stabilization fund takes 5.4 shillings per litre of diesel and petrol, and that fund collects about 2.4 billion every month. That savings as a levy under the PDL regulations as provided is used during such difficult times. And last month we did employ, the current month we did employ, for example, 1.77 billion to reduce the price of diesel from what would have been 16 shillings to 5 shillings. The price of petrol, what would have been 12 shillings, we reduced it to 6 shillings, and so on and so forth. So we are conscious, Mheshimiwa, honorable members, about the plight of the cost of living, and we continue to address that and mitigate, albeit the challenge the whole world is facing today. As regarding anything else on G2G which I have not touched, and so that I can touch on power, I did ask my team to put up one slide, because earlier on I didn't show the slides. I've got one slide on power. If you allow me to answer most of the questions on energy, I don't know whether I can get that up, somebody from behind here. And what do I want to say here? On energy, Your Excellency, I wish we had done the 5,000 megawatts in 2013. We didn't do it, Ethiopia did it. They are exporting power to us today. We have energy insecurity today. We have very high cost of energy because we are running diesel, like I'm showing you on that one slide. Just go to the maybe the third page. Let's look at that. From hydro today, and that's the only slide I'm going to use to answer this question. From hydro, we have an installed capacity of 784, but because of the hydrology, it is performing at 68% at 532. So we don't have some 250 megawatts because of hydrology, and in the lower slide you'll see Masinga developing 0 today. We don't have water in Masinga. In geothermal, it's developing at 80% because of some maintenance and upgrades going on. That is what is helping us. Look at thermal. Thermal is developing 92%. The most expensive power plants are what is running the economy today. So if we had our geothermal developed, we can even expire the geothermal today. How can you expire it when it is what is running the economy? But it is running at 30 shillings, at 40 shillings, at 50 shillings. Look at wind and solar, the place we praise very much. At peak hour, there is absolutely no solar in the evening, during the peak. And that is why we talk to Your Excellency, the storage. We need storage so that we can store during the day and use it during peak hours and so on and so forth. Look at what I've just talked to. Ethiopia exporting power to Kenya, 200 megawatts, because we didn't develop our own. And we have gone there to ask them to sell us more. Because, let's see the final slide. Look at Masinga developing zero and going all the way down. Let's go to the the totals. And what do I want? Those are the solars not developing. Let's see the totals at the bottom. I wanted to see the 2,136 capacity of available capacity. And today we need almost 2,200. So we are already energy short, and that creates a problem. We cannot avoid running the diesel engines. That is where we are. The available capacity today is 2136 during peak hour. We need about 2170, which we don't have. So we are not in a very good place. We are working around the clock to bring some of the geothermal which are almost on. We've got, of course, the moratorium that I talked about earlier. But Your Excellency, let me also say, during the visit of His Majesty, the King, a few days ago, we did talk to High Grand Falls. We've got investors from the UK, and High Grand Falls, 700 to 1,000 megawatts is high on the agenda. There is funding for that. We just have to do what we must do to walk the journey to make sure we get the right pricing of energy. But that is on the radar, and we are working on that. Let me also say on the cost of power that, Honorable Member, 65% of the revenues Kenya Power collects is used to compensate power generation. And the 35% then goes into all the other things. The more important thing which I want to mention here, and I think it is very important, is the reforms which we are undertaking in Kenya Power and Lighting. And one of them is the fact that Kenya Power today buys some 12,000 gigawatts of energy, and they only sell about 9,000. So we are unable to account for 3,000 gigawatts. 25% of the energy that we pay the generators for, we don't sell. Either it gets lost in transmission losses, commercial losses, which includes theft of energy, and so on and so forth. We've asked Kenya Power through a cabinet-approved paper that we need to bring down the power losses to 16% from 23%. We are restructuring Kenya Power to bring in knowledge and capacity of the minority shareholders who own 49.9% against the government shareholding of 50.01. And where today we do nominate all the directors to the board in spite of the 49.9% shareholder. So we have amended the articles of memorandum and articles of association, and very shortly, I think on 10th of next month or 10th of this month, we'll be having a special AGM to adopt the amended memorandum and articles of association that will then be used to bring 4 directors to represent the minority and 5 directors to represent government, and therefore infuse the capacity of the business people who have invested in Kenya Power to make sure that the governance issues are addressed, all these power losses are addressed. We are also restructuring their balance sheet to get a better debt equity ratio by moving assets which ordinarily should under what you call the decoupled, or what do I want, the word I'm looking for is, the power sector in Kenya is basically unbundled. We have the generators, we have the transmission, and we have the off-taker. Kenya Power is an off-taker, is still doing transmission today. And some of those assets which are sitting in their books should go to Ketraco, the transmitter. We do the bookkeeping and ensure that we get a debt equity ratio that can give them a healthy balance sheet that can go to the market and do what it must do with the infusion of the capacity in management, having introduced the minority shareholder. But more importantly, World Bank is then coming in to give us a delivery-based facility that will ensure that for all these deliverables, they are able to support us to address some of these things so that we can truly achieve the 16% power losses, working down to ensure that you do not pay for losses, because at the moment we pay for up to 25% of power losses, which is really lost in the system because of poor network, transmission, commercial, or theft of power, and so on and so forth. I want to beg to stop there, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We thank you, Waziri Davis. And now go to CS Ndung'u.
Thank you very much, and I do believe that there are several questions that have been shared. So let me stick to how they have come through, and then I hope I'll be efficient. And the starting one was with Mheshimiwa Kimani Ichung'wah, the majority leader, and he talked
Can I just add one so that you can clear the air?
Okay.
As far as Kenyans are concerned, that did you get government-to-government help with regard to fertilizer? Because we heard it from President Putin when he hosted the Africa-Russia summit, that he gave so many tons of fertilizer to Kenya. It's a matter that has been in the public domain. It would be good to hear if upon receipt of the same was a value addition or something, or whether, because it must have come in as a grant. I think it's good that this is also be explained.
Thank you very much. I'm going to get an answer to that, because I know we had G2G. We started with getting fertilizer from Morocco, and the whole idea was to negotiate the price, and the entry price was what the farmers were paying. We even provided to KTDA, the tea farmers. So it's something that, let me get an answer whether we got, that was a complicated time for that part of the world. Yeah. The first question was by the leader of majority. The issue is state-owned enterprises and the whole issue of depreciation and rationalization. I think you can imagine, Your Excellency, from 2009, when the new privatization law was created, we have not privatized even one institution. It's a whole, can I say, depressing issue that the privatization law was supposed to remove the SOEs that are the government doesn't need, leave those that are just going to be strategic for purposes of helping the market. Now, we are happy that the Parliament has actually approved the new privatization law.
Prof, again, just on that, the need for oversight by Parliament is an issue of concern, even as you privatize. So please, just take that into account.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think Parliament will always oversight virtually everything. But I just wanted, because I think the rules of the game will still have to be made by Parliament at the end of the day. But I wanted to say the new mode of privatization allows some diversity in terms of what you're dealing with. We are not saying that the Parliament will not be involved. Parliament will be involved. I've listened to some even frontier works in this area in some countries, like Indonesia, for example. And you can actually bring together all the SOEs in one kikapu, and you can rank them. These are the high performing, these are the medium, and below here are the laggards. And you actually transfer their management, not ownership. And you can now then pick up as they become profitable. You can cherry pick in terms of what you want to privatize. And because there are diverse ways of privatizing, this is the route that will go. For us, you can imagine the kind of transfers we make to SOEs. You can imagine the savings. So essentially, this is the journey that we're taking now that the law is in place. Tax regime, I think, again, the next question was tax regime and whether it will be used in the next finance bill. That is what we are working hard to, because we want to make sure that we are well grounded, both in terms of theory and practice, and we make sure that we come up with a tax system that is going to give us that is going to be with us for a long time. What are we looking for? We are looking for a tax system that is sustainable. We are looking for a tax system that is predictable. We are looking for that tax system that is going to give us value for money. Let me give you, for example, one point about the flavor of the current tax system, for example. One of the analyses they have done on VAT, for example, is that 18% of the total VAT goes to refund, VAT refunds. Okay, 18%. Out of that 18% that goes to VAT refunds, 95% goes only to two products: bread and milk. You can imagine the next question I ask some of my researchers: who buys milk from the supermarket and bread? Can we have a chat? Anyway, I don't want to go beyond there, Your Excellency. I think you can see what are we trying to do. If 18% of the VAT goes to refund, 95% of that refund is taken up by two products. Then we have to ask, let's find out those who are taking those products. And anyway, that's another level. But I just wanted to, that's a flavor of why we really need to reform. The third question I was asked was about when we talk about corruption, and I tried to decompose this into terms of greasing efficiency and also state capture, or what we call illegal extraction of economic rents, because I wouldn't say corruption. But the most important thing here is that we want to ask ourselves, there is an institutional failure problem, but we have to fix it. Let me give you an example. Some years back, I don't want to tell you when, but you remember when. There was a declaration that any uniformed police officer can stop a vehicle on the road, isn't it? You remember that? What was the reaction by the market? Standardize the bribe to 5 to 50 shillings. So there is no question asked. Matatu stops, it just gives 50 bob and continues. That is pushing in institutional failure problem to the next level. I observed this on the road myself. I'm sure you also observe. So you can see we need to step back and come back and say, let's force our institutions let's push our institutions to operate the way they are supposed to operate. I was asked the question about the disequilibrium in the macro space, which also contributed to the nominal exchange rate movements. But also, I think my friend Udai had asked also why Tanzania and Uganda is not the same. They did not interfere with their market. You know, the bottom line is this. When you affect the non-tradable prices, even now, even like this morning, I was still looking at our structure of non-tradable prices. They are still pushing. They are still not yet finished the adjustment process. They are still pushing for the exchange rate depreciation because they are showing there is a disequilibrium. It's a good example of, we used to talk about many years back, the resource problem, the natural resource problem. You know, there are some years that the government was the only investor and it was investing in non-tradable sector. If you make yourself the only game in town, you'll be the only game in town, but that game will not last long. That is what is happening. That is why the nominal exchange rate has to now adjust because it was held constant. Every time I turn, this is my, I think there is somebody who mentioned, my friend Oba, you mentioned that this is 10 months, but I think mine is like 11 months since I took this job. You can imagine the speed at which I have been trying to cover to run some of these things. Where did we fail? Where did the policy failures start? And how can we fix it? Now, Your Excellency, now I come to your questions. One of the things I need to let you know, while I was away after the policy tour, after the central bank, I came back to realize that the tax to GDP, we call it tax effort, was 22% in Kenya. And somebody also made the message clear that Kenya was doing better than all the countries combined. 22% of tax to GDP was the revenue. That was when Kenya government was financing its total expenditure, both recurrent and development, to the tune of between 96% and 98%. I was one of those people who pushed the East African community, especially the governors, to argue that our convergence criteria is 25%. Go ahead and do so much work. And I was looking at it that we are only 3% to go, isn't it, to get to 25. I have come back for another tour of policy duty to realize that we had gone down to 13.7%. You cannot do it; cannot happen unless there is a major structural change. Right now, we are struggling. We are at 15.8%. That's why you see the fiscal gap. The whole issue is that if we move to 9% of fiscal gap, we started accumulating so much debt, so that we have to clear that for us even to think, because it has to be financed. Now, just imagine on the IMF, we have agreed we are moving towards 19%. Just imagine the other countries were moving on. So in a sense, we have to pay for these policy mistakes, and I think this is something that we feel has really been a problem. That is why, when we are having a fiscal gap of around 5.2% now, even though we had targeted 4%. This 145 billion, it is ranging between 0.9% and 1.2%, was actually being pushed by purely interest rates, expenditure, and because of the depreciation. So it means we have very little flexibility. It means that because, by the way, by having 22% of GDP coming from tax revenue and financing 96 to 98% of government total budget, both recurrent and development, it means that the government, the government sector was also building up. So it's going to be difficult to say, now let's cut it back today. It has to be financed through recurrent expenditure. Perhaps sometimes we pause the development, the spending. And that's why let me clarify that affordable housing tax is a tax, but it is being used as an intervention in a targeted sector, affordable housing. Well, that's why I'm calling it also at the very end an investment. Now, there are two things that I'm perplexed about. Expanding cities cannot work if we don't have affordable housing. And let's not assume that expanding cities can only be in Nairobi and the major cities. We can also create other smaller cities, satellite cities, but they will be given a boost by this kind of targeted intervention and targeted investment in that sector, because it has a large impact in the economy. It can pull the economy with it, and that is why we are so passionate about it. Mheshimiwa Omar, I do believe that the G2G is an interesting case. The G2G was a success. I had to spend a lot of time sitting the ministers for, especially Tanzania and Uganda, how it is working. By the way, let me give credit to our market. Our market is very efficient at the import and retail level. The only thing that was hitting them was the dollar availability. And we found them with swaps in banks. They were crying. They could lengthen the swaps. The biggest problem was how the swaps were working. Okay? They will give you in shillings, but the dollar is depreciating. Then everything becomes a problem when they are repaying it. It was a problem. Let me say, it was also a problem even when I was a governor. But that time the quantities were small and the market was trading in high figures. But you could see the repos. Sometimes you see the repos, they push the shilling by 2 shillings, then you ask what is the problem, they tell you we are looking for dollars, then they say, okay, continue looking for it, the market will correct itself. But that's when there is abundance. You know, the intervention that we do, by the way, somebody also asked why we should intervene. The intervention you do in a floating exchange rate is the one that you actually watch and decide that, okay, if the dollars are the ones that are scarce, I'll push some dollars in the market and withdraw the shillings. Okay? It is an operation. So in a floating exchange rate, even the reserves become part of an indirect instrument of monetary policy. That's how it should happen. If the dollar is becoming the dollar is depreciating because there's so much dollars in the market, you suck the dollars and you push the shillings out. Those are the interventions that markets believe. And because it's a competitive behavior, you're not allocating shillings or dollars. You're actually posting it in the Reuters and let everyone quote. It disciplines the market. Don't forget that in markets where repeat purchases is a good game, it works to discipline the market. And that's why the G2G is good. But you see, let me come back to our market. We are only lifting the oil and coming to the supply, and then the market takes over. Okay? So we are just helping that. And us is a framework agreement. They decide what. Banks are opening their LCs. So many banks are now opening their LCs. So we are happy about that. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Okay, I'll come to that. Cost of living, yes, food and fuel are the main drivers. They are erratic, and you are right. They are erratic. Sometimes you can find inflation jumps to 15%, and within no time food is available in the market, it goes down by a margin of 10%. So they are erratic. The problem is that they don't form the core. So it means that the decisions we take are also to try and push tighten monetary policy, and then watch what happens. Right now, the central bank is watching, after 3 months of this, where are we? Can we analyze the results? It's the same thing in the US. They said we pause, but we start looking at it and analyzing the results. Then the other day, I listened to the discussion. We were sitting in the discussion, and the US Secretary of the US Treasury said that the core inflation is not responding, but other forms of inflation are responding. If the core inflation is high, then you know that interest rates will remain elevated. Now, let me come to the dollar behavior and some concerns about holding. There is no holding, but there is always self-fulfilling expectations. What would drive this? First, the Eurobond. I mean, everybody knows about the Eurobond. I don't need to explain it, but I'm also saying it is a debt that was negotiated at 6.5% for 10 years to be paid as a bullet payment. Let me not comment on it, but let me make a strong statement here. If you borrow at an interest rate, a real interest rate that is higher than your real growth, you are igniting solvency charges. But that is a statement of fact, but we can always debate. Now, Eurobond must be paid. So there are some people who believe that since the government doesn't have the dollars, which is erroneous, the government will go to the market to buy the dollars. So that's one of the factors behind the accumulation, which is self-fulfilling expectation. The other one is that the self-fulfilling expectation is that the dollar will continue depreciating because we have not seen the whole effects being lapped out. That is, the adjustment process is not yet complete. The misalignment was much larger than we anticipated or computed. But it's simple. I've been trying to work out with non-tradable prices to see the extent to which that misalignment has been corrected. But of course, it has also come back because, again, there were so many other shocks, so you cannot disentangle the shocks that are also coming in between. But the other problem is that there is still scarcity of dollars in the market. It is just last week, the ambassador for Egypt came to me and said, we have to sit and think about barter trade. We'll get your tea, but right now we cannot get your tea. It is lying in Mombasa because we have no dollars to pay. We'll get your tea, and you also come and decide what you get from us. And then I said, I'm going to sit and talk to the market. His Excellency the President had to send the Minister for Agriculture, CS for Agriculture, to Pakistan to negotiate barter trade. So we are trying to alleviate these problems. So you can imagine, why is the dollar scarcity? It's because the interest rates in the US has risen as far down from 0.5% to about 5% now. So it means that assets, dollar-denominated assets, are lucrative. And if you assume that the risk profile for the US is quite low, so you can see everybody is trying to say, oh, let's park our dollars where there are higher returns. And finally, I had somebody saying they are parallel market. There is no parallel market. We have a segmented market. And it depends on which segment you go. At times, we can navigate through all those market segmentation, but we have not managed, especially in times of crisis, market tends to move away and segment further. But it's something that central bank is addressing. Mheshimiwa Eugene Wamarwa, thank you very much for this budgeted corruption. I wouldn't say budgeted corruption because you are trying to officialize or institutionalize corruption. We don't do that. And in fact, in the paper, what you are trying to quote, what I actually said, is that when this issue came up, I said that that is the control of government, COG, is an office. They have their responsibilities. If an issue like this is brought to me, I take it to the Auditor General. I want to get the true results. What we have given you is our true numbers. So what we are going to do now is because I've already pushed this to the AG, as to the Auditor General. I want to wait for that, because essentially you cannot make a statement unless you have also provided the facts. I have provided the facts to you. Those are the real data. The budgeting issue was answered, but let me put it this way. In times of crisis right now, we are looking for anywhere to slash. But most of the ministries and departments come and try to defend their budget very hard. So it is not, because we start from, I think it is an interesting case, because even when they say this is their budget, when we come and speak to Parliament, they also do their own game and slash where they think is important. And ours is not the final. But we have to do that. But because they defend their budget on the basis of what they're doing, it becomes quite expensive. So essentially, I would like to leave that until, because I would like also flat answers, because we don't want to have that kind of connotation that we have institutionalized corruption. And this is not even corruption. You're calling it budgeted corruption, but this is actually theft of public resources, if at all it was taking place. But if, as a government officer, you come and state that, we want the facts so that we take control of it. And we also take the measures that are required. That's the way I would like to leave it. That's why I made just a short statement of facts and paraded them, and just said that I would have been told, look, I even went further to check, do I have a letter trying to say that there is a problem here? Because essentially we disburse on the basis of the budget. Mheshimiwa Catherine, thank you very much. Cost of living to Kenyans, we know is a problem. We have been here. We have been hit by structural shocks most of the time. I dealt with this crisis in 2011. A severe drought, food shortage, fuel prices were rising. When you combine importation of food, importation of fuel, their impact on domestic prices is more than unity. So it's going to be amplified. And that is where we have a problem, because it can start driving itself. Now, what we have done, and this is okay, adding to the question that was raised by Mheshimiwa Wadai, is that we had the easiest and simplest solution first is bring the food in the market. How do we bring the food in the market? It is actually to import. Because even if you reduce taxes, it cannot solve the problem, because the prices are being driven by the scarcity value. And this is, and you can tell this is more prohibitive than we actually think. So if we import food and exempt them from duty, and we also bring in a very strong mechanism for distribution to bring them into the market, things work out. Things will work out in the short term. But we learn our lessons. That's why we are all talking about climate change, smart agriculture, what do we need to do, the dams. In fact, talking to the World Bank, the new World Bank president, he's talked about we need a big bet for climate change. We start looking at land, looking at agriculture, looking at irrigation and smart agriculture. That will solve the whole problem. It's a whole system of so many things that we really need to do. You are right, Mheshimiwa Udai, again. I think the market has let us down. I've been looking at the market, for example, for the for public sector debt. That is bond market in the trading. Again, I left that market very vibrant. I even was championing for savings and development bond for 30 years. So we not only have to look at NSE, what is happening, but also how bonds are trading. Because I think I've called the market, especially regulators, we sit and discuss this. We may have started being beaten a long time ago, but we want to reverse this tide. And you are right, your observation is correct, because essentially, if you are trading your shares and there is no predictive behavior, or there is what I may call conflict of interest in terms of how the market is allocating those resources, that market will not survive. And market is our savior here. And that is a very important issue that we need to bring up. So, from the combination of what I said earlier about where we were in terms of the government, the size of government, the taxation, tax to GDP, and how it has declined, we have retro space. We have no fiscal space, even to change direction. Somebody even asked me, where is the money for El Nino? When we went to discuss the El Nino and the emergency response, the first thing I said is that we have to have 3 lines of defense. The first line of defense is that if El Nino strikes, we are going to see how we reallocate our budget at every ministry, at every county government. The second line of defense is government will look for its own resources, how it can reorganize to salvage the situation. And the third line of defense will be our multilateral institutions have components of these crisis measures. So we are doing that. We have activated that. But in a sense, we also came back and could not process information properly because the information initially was there will be El Nino. And then after that, there was mild discussion about El Nino, and then a full-blown elaboration by the meteorological department said we may experience heavier than normal rains, but not El Nino. So everybody went back to the back seat, but now the reaction we are seeing and the pictures and even the experiences from people in those areas we are seeing is that we have to activate the initial program of how we deal with it. The whole issue, I think I've touched most of the things except the one you wanted me to touch. I think we have worked on it.
I think we're okay.
I've touched most of the things. Let me say this. I will make sure that I think we haven't brought fertilizer from Russia. I can say we are not so sure. We haven't got information yet, but I do know that we brought in fertilizer from Morocco because that was the first impact. Let me say this: the most important thing is that when we are in a crisis, we have to come together and see where do we think we can resolve the crisis. Right now, the front line, all of us should be, let's import food so that duty-free, so that we actually solve the hunger problem right now. We use the resources we have to solve the El Nino. Then after that, we'll be saying, since we don't want to be beaten again, we want a sustainable model of economic development that is going to support us. Let me say, the point that she was making about capital accumulation, affordable housing is an investment model. That investment is going to support our capital accumulation. I've been working even with other people like Justin Lin from China in structural models, and he said, our capital accumulation is so low that we cannot ignite economic transformation. Why? The bottom-up economic transformation agenda by Kenya Kwanza is there. Economic transformation is actually going to be the answer for our economy. But it will not happen on its own. We really have to work, and that is why we need interventions like the one he's talking about, affordable housing, a Hasra fund. All other interventions that we are parading are going to be very, very important. Because this is what will make us sure that in future, even when we are hit by crisis, we have flexibility to deal with the crisis. And that is where we also have fiscal space. Fiscal space will signal fiscal consolidation and debt sustainability. I think I stopped there because I think most of the other issues were touched on in a different way. Thank you very much.
Coach, I think the issue of Russian fertilizer was not an importation by the government. It was a donation. And I think it came from the Russian side. And Kenya was listed amongst the beneficiary nations that received a donation from Russia of fertilizer. Whether we receive in times of crisis, if we are receiving, and when I was at the Ministry of Devolution, whenever we receive a donation of rice from China, we declare. Has this been declared? Has it been confirmed?
I will refer it to the Ministry of Agriculture, and I will come back to you, Mheshimiwa Wamarwa.
You come back to us, Prof.
Yes.
You'll not come back to
okay, I'll come back to you because I don't have that information.
Thank you.
We were trying to get to the minister as we were sitting here.
In fact, the figure, if I correctly remember, was 34,000 metric tons. Yeah. Okay.
Excellency, just one last thing. If you do, I know we're all tired. Professor, you said that this whole thing of the G2G was supposed to add dollars into the market. So by Chirchir's own submission, you have therefore put about $3.4 billion into the market by deferred payment. Number two, you're saying Pakistan and Pakistan and Egypt, which is the biggest importers of tea, are saying we don't have dollars, so they want you to barter with them. So is this dollar crisis nearing an end anytime soon?
Thank you. Actually, we wanted to save dollars, not to add to the market, because essentially the export sector was demanding so much dollars every month. In fact, every month it was like, can you intervene? Can you give us reserves? That's what they were telling the central bank. So we wanted to save that situation so that, one, the volatility it was creating was massive. Two, the quantum of dollars it was now buying, even though they will come back through shillings and then again transform, was quite massive. That's one aspect. The second aspect is that we are still in a dollar global shortage. And that is why countries like Egypt and Pakistan wanted to do better trade. If you look at even the Euroboard for Egypt, the way it's trading, last week I checked, it was trading at 24.3%. It's a crisis. Just imagine how your Eurobond is trading at we went to 18% and we have come back to 12.4%, but we are still screaming. You can imagine they had to go to the market regardless of what was happening because they had to salvage that.
Okay, I think we need to
something that we can solve.
We need to bring this to a conclusion. Are you sure, Eugene?
No, just a clarification, because Prof said about the issue of importing more food. But we are aware, and I think Senator Omar referred to it, we had about 24 billion that was, allocated for importation of food through KNTC. And somehow we never felt the impact of reduction of price. In fact, they were selling the imported food higher than the local. And many Kenyans consider it a fraud. What do you have to say about that?
Actually, we haven't got all the foods that were earmarked for importation. That is why the impact have been slow to be felt. But some of us who go to the market, we can see that the impact has been positive. The whole issue is that, for example, I have some people telling me that they had all the consignment of rice from India, but India just crossed by selling any rice outside the market. And this is, again, information that's out there. They are now trying other countries. The whole idea is that most of them thought that they would get some of these products from the COMESA market. But then it has become problematic. So in a sense, what I think is happening is also market search costs are becoming very high because some countries are reacting because some of them don't know whether this supply problem would be persisting.
Prof, we thank you and your team, Davis, for coming before us, and Abraham, we had you, P.S. Inga. These are difficult times, and that's why we felt we needed to have this conversation with you. The committee will recess to look at what is possible. If need be, we may even come back to you with our own recommendations with which you may not even agree. But we are all in this country, we are in it together, it's our land, we have no other place. And so let's keep working. Thank you. We had agreed on our own work schedule, so we meet on Thursday.